Hello, it's Dr. Alan Yim. In this video, I'm going to be talking about notating chords. So, this is how we're going to notate chords for probably the remainder of Theory 2, 3, and 4 normally. Up to this point, you've seen chords written like this. So here's a triad, and here is a seventh chord. So, in actual music, it's a little bit rare to see the chords written like this. Normally in a score, if you have an orchestral score, there'll be a single line for each instrument. If you sing in choir, there might be a single line for one or two voices, but each voice will be separated. And in a piano score, of course, you have the treble and bass clef. One is usually for the right hand, and one is usually for the left hand. So this kind of notation really doesn't occur by itself that often in music. So let's take a look at how we do notate it. So first of all, we do use a piano score, and here I've written bass and treble clef. And the first thing we should know is that because of the type of music we're studying right now, we're going to be writing in what's called SATB. So it's soprano and alto, the upper treble voices, and tenor and bass, the lower voices, usually the male voices. So you'll hear me refer to this as SATB, and that's the normal way people will refer to it rather than saying soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, which is a little bit a bit much to repeat. Okay, for the soprano, the stems are always going to be up, and for the altos, stems down. In the treble clef, tenors, stem up, and for the bass, stem down. Now, should one of the parts go higher than its neighbor, for example, let's say the alto has a note that's higher than the soprano at some point, that would be notated like this. And you might notice it's going to look a little funny. But if you see something like this, what does that mean? Well, that means that this is still the soprano, right? And this is still the alto. This is called voice crossing. Normally you would avoid this, but just be aware that the stems do indicate which voice is supposed to sing what part. Now, let's take a look at the range of the voices. So, the range, of course, is the highest and lowest pitches that each voice can comfortably sing normally. And it's sort of interesting to note the relationship between this, because, as you're going to see, there seems to be certain pitches that this centers around. So this is the soprano range, this is the alto, and the tenor looks like this, and the bass looks like this. Okay, so this is just kind of a general guideline. If you're writing for, say, a choir, a high school choir especially, where the singers aren't professional, this is kind of what you should stick to, because most of the people, if not all of them, will be able to reach these pitches. So this is soprano, alto, tenor, and bass range. Okay, what's interesting about this, if you look closely, there is one note that everybody can sing, and that's C4. So whether you're a bass or a soprano, that C4 is supposed to be in the range for everybody. When you write your chords, you want to, again, stay in those ranges. Now, how do you memorize this, which I highly recommend, so that you don't go outside of the range? Well, this is C to G for the soprano. And this is the opposite, G to C for the altos. Same thing for the tenor, it switches around again. It's basically the soprano range down an octave, right? G to C. And then C, well, we could put G in the bottom, but actually they can go a little bit lower than that. So these are the general ranges for these four voices. So here's soprano, here's Here's the alto, tenor, and the bass. Now, if you ever go and study things like fugue, you'll notice that the voices, and we call them voices, but they are actually parts on an instrument. Usually, musical parts that they fall into these ranges. So one part might enter on the tonic key, and the next one will enter on the dominant, because these ranges are kind of roughly separated by, a fourth. So they kind of have this relationship in the music as well. When the voices enter in 4-part writing, they tend to enter in the range that they sing in. Okay, in contrapuntal writing. Let's go ahead. Okay, so things that you should avoid when you're writing chords. Okay, I already mentioned voice crossing. You're not going to put more than an octave between the upper adjacent voices. So what are the upper adjacent voices? Well, when you have the soprano and the alto, let's say. So you don't want to have more than an octave between those two. And you don't want to have more than an octave between the alto and the tenor. So you have to look at these two in 4-part writing. The bass can be any distance from the other 3 voices. So the bass is kind of an exception. You could write a chord where the bass is down here and the other 3 voices are up here. So the bass is down in the low G. The tenor is actually up a 10th. And then the alto and the soprano. Let me write that chord so you can see what it looks like. This is kind of a normal voicing for a chord where you have the upper voices close together. It looks like this. Okay? So that's what I just played. Now, if you flip it upside down and put the voices close together down at the bottom and put the soprano somewhere else, far away, it's going to sound really odd. It's going to sound muddy down in the bottom. So let's say I put the bottom voices down like this, and I put the soprano up here. That's not a typical voicing of a chord. And you'll notice it sounds like there's a big hole in the middle. That might be great for a pianist, because I could play the chord in my left hand and the melody up here. But in 4-part writing, this is not good, and it looks like this. So maybe I'll write this in red so you can see. This is a kind of voicing that for 4-part writing you would not use. Okay, so here, as you can see, there's more than an octave between the alto and the soprano there. So that's considered poor. If I flip it around and put that's putting the upper, this is the same chord, but now I've moved the alto and the tenor closer to the soprano and left the bass by itself. So again, compare the 2 sounds. This is the norm, and this is the one with too much space. Okay? That's good, and this, not so good. Maybe for piano, but only to accommodate the pianist. So let me show you what that other voicing looks like. Let me erase this a little bit. Okay, I'll write this one in green so you can see it. This is definitely a better version. It will look something like this. Whoops. Let me not write the tenor in the wrong clef. Okay, so the tenor's actually singing at the top of his range, right here, on that G, and then the bass is down here. So the one on the left, again, has a spacing error. The one on the right is preferred, where the notes are close together at the top. Okay, so I think we have most of the things covered in this that are important. There's one other element. Okay, so obviously when you write a triad, you're going to have, if you're writing it in 4 parts, if it's in root position, go ahead and write 2 roots, because you know you have 4 notes in the chord. You're going to have to double one of those notes, and in this situation you're going to double the root of the chord. So let me go ahead and show you. I'm going to go from the closed position of it, the closed version of the chord, to the normal, or the one that we usually use. So let's say we want to write an F chord. An F chord might look like this. And if we write it in 4 parts, okay, keeping in mind we want to keep the upper parts together. There's many ways of doing this. I could write it like this. How about, let's see, how about I'll put the alto and the soprano, and then the tenor. Now I have to put the bass. Okay, so what should you notice about this? Well, again, the stems are always up, down, up, down. So for soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, I have 2 roots. Okay, whoops. Okay, so I'm doubling the roots, and I'm going to keep the upper voices together. So they don't have to be that close together. When they're like this though, so I'll just tell you, so when this is less than an octave, we're going to call this closed position. Okay, it's closed because there is less than, I hope you know what that means, less than an octave between the soprano and the tenor. So the upper voices are contained in a distance less than a soprano. Essentially it means that those pitches are smooshed as close together as they can be. Okay, that's what that chord sounds like. I could also put the bass down an octave, much farther away. That still sounds good. Okay, and the bass has that range of an octave, so it can sing both of those. Now, I'm going to write this in an open position. So if the upper voices are within an octave or more, like this, I'll show you. So let's say we need an F, an A, and a C, and we're going to put the F just to get it out of the way. Yeah, I'll put it down here. The bass could stay where it is, but I'm going to move it. So here, this is open, because there is greater than or equal to an octave between the bass and the tenor. Between the soprano and the tenor. Okay, so let's hear some of these versions. So what I just wrote now, this open, sounds really, okay. The voices are very far apart. Okay, and then the other one. That's very closed position. Okay. Let me highlight this for you. So closed, and then this is open. More than an octave there. Alright, so how much space can you have between the voices? Well, you don't want these adjacent upper voices to get too far away from each other, because then it starts sounding really strange. So I'll show you how far apart they can be. Right now it's good. So between the 2 adjacent voices here, no more than an octave. And even an octave sometimes sounds a little bit too much, too wide. But these are the possibilities here. So between the soprano and the alto, no more than an octave, and the same thing between the alto and the tenor. You're always safe to keep them close together, but remember, if it's more than an octave, then that's a mistake. Okay. I think that's all we have for this video. The big thing is to take some of the chords and practice writing them in this open position, and you'll get a lot of practice of this whenever you write in 4 parts. Thanks for watching.